Welcome to the Dev Launch Podcast, where we bring you inspiring stories of the tech industry's rising stars. Our guest today is Dan Leeman, the co-founder of Automation Helpers, a no-code implementation partner. Dan's career took some interesting twists and turns, from high school band teacher all the way to business tech partner. But as we're about to discover, this non-traditional path may very well be the special sauce that's bringing his software development agency such strong inbound traffic from his YouTube videos. Let's take a listen. Dan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Tony. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you coming on. Our mutual friend, Natalie, connected us. And within the first probably couple minutes, I knew that we were going to be fast friends. If for nothing else, I think we bonded over the Midwestern Minnesotan accent.
That's true. Yes, we definitely like to elongate our vowels a little bit, which, really bonds people together.
It really does. And you can always tell, you know when somebody's from Minnesota, Fargo, South Dakota, that general area, maybe even Wisconsin a little bit, because we all sound, we all have that same similar accent. So
don't you know?
Oh, yeah, there. I can't remember what it was that I said, but I said something. You're like, oh, yeah, you're from Minnesota, aren't you?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, Dan, I really appreciate you coming on. You've got such a unique background and story. And then to hear about, the recency of kind of when you guys launched Automation Helpers, I thought it would be so helpful for our audience to hear a little bit more about your story. So before we even talk about Automation Helpers, I'd really love to kind of go back even before then, right? Earlier on in your career, from Fargo public school band teacher all the way to successful tech entrepreneur. You've got this really variety experience and a career of interesting turns. Do you mind sharing a little bit more about that origin story and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, for sure. And I always think it's fun. I think we've entered an age where more people have these career twists and turns. It's not always like, hey, I was a software developer and then I was a senior software developer. And now, it just, I think we see more people just given the accessibility, and not everything is based on the university stamp that you get. So, so I started as a high school band teacher. I am in the Fargo, North Dakota area. And so I was doing the whole, jazz band, pit orchestra, marching band, all the kind of stuff that goes along with that. And at the time, I thought it would be great to come up with this brilliant idea of creating the Netflix of sheet music, which this was prior to the time where you could just, download all the sheet music that you want, PDF form. Everything was a little bit archaic. You had to, purchase it and ship it in the mail and that kind of stuff. So at the time, I was so inundated by my day job and what I did, and I really enjoyed it. But I was like, I want to work on this side hustle kind of project, which of course failed miserably, but was nothing but a great learning experience. So through that, I switched from my band teaching job, and then I went into ed tech, worked in that space for a while. It was kind of an all-purpose account manager kind of stuff. I built out their sales team. I don't know how long of a version of this story you want.
Oh, this is great. Keep it going.
But yeah, they didn't really have a sales team. And I said, hey, what do you think about this commission structure? And I'll go sell this to some universities. So was always kind of a entrepreneur, but within a company, taking on innovative things, taking a little bit of risk, get some skin in the game to be able to do it. So I worked on that. I wasn't very technical at the time, but suddenly I wanted to be able to integrate like our help desk system and our CRM, and no one else was going to do it. We had small budgets, everything else. So I was like, I'll integrate this. And so I taught myself how to code, did some of that. And then I realized like, hey, this technical stuff kind of speaks to me too. But I had this sales side. Now I had this technical side. So I was like, I don't know what I want to do with that. So weirdly enough, the second largest Microsoft campus in the world is in Fargo, North Dakota, which you wouldn't expect after Redmond. But I started working for a Microsoft partner, and through there, I got into the space and technology, which is called pre-sales. It's kind of that heart between technical and sales. You're the kind of person who does demos for clients. You're not the account executive or the closer on the team, but you're doing a lot of that work. And so that's where I really built up a lot of my technical chops, was through that process. And then from there, I've done everything from architecture work to doing some development on different platforms, and always kind of bouncing back and forth between that sales side and the technical side. And I found that every job I'd go between, I'd kind of be somewhere in there. So I went to work for a startup. We got acquired by Zoom. And then post Zoom, I have been in growing my own business.
That's incredible. And I think like as you've jumped around, you already touched on this a little bit, but you found kind of this entrepreneurial spirit. Would you say, is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, I've always really struggled with companies that are like, hey, we want to put you in this box and we want to replicate those boxes because this is how we operate large companies. I've always done better probably at small to mid-sized companies where they say, hey, we want the best person who can wear 15 different hats and can just make magic happen. That's the kind of company that I've really appreciated working for, is because I can tap into all of those different skill sets. And I see both sides of the coin, because it's hard to find people like that, right? If you just find someone who can execute a very high level for everything. But to also say like, no, you only do this one specific task. I don't know. I find that most people in tech they have some element of creativity to them. They don't want to be completely in this manufactured environment and work monkey work.
That's right.
So yes, you're exactly right. I've really enjoyed being able to build within systems.
And I think the thing with that too is, it's like you said, a lot of people, especially in the tech space, as they get into tech entrepreneurship, what they've realized is they don't really fit the traditional mold. It's not like they went to school for a 4-year degree with, some type of computer science. That's some people, but vast majority of entrepreneurs that I'm seeing in the tech space do come from varied backgrounds. And so, because like you had with your experience, you're a band teacher and then you move into kind of like account management, somewhat of sales, you don't really fit a traditional kind of box or mold.
Right.
So yeah, some of those traditional boxes just don't fit for who you are and kind of like the skill set that you have.
Yeah, and I think it's hard for some people to make that transition. So I coached a bunch of teachers, and this is prior to kind of the economic headwinds that have changed a little bit, but teachers on how to find new career paths, because oftentimes those are very multifaceted individuals who can provide value other places. It's just that it's really hard when like, hey, what do you have on paper? And you don't match up exactly. So just in general, I think there's a lot to be learned from being able to sell yourself in different ways. Like I'm not everything that you need 100% on paper. I'm like 70% there, but here's what else I add on top of that, I think is always really cool.
Yeah. I didn't prep you for this question, but it was the first thing that was coming through my mind as you were sharing your experience as a band teacher. But like, could you speak to like maybe one or two of those transferable skills that you gained from being a band teacher that you're like, this totally set me apart from my competition and or really set me up for success in tech entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I mean, probably a number of different things. One is like just being able to communicate with people, I think is huge. So especially in the arts, I mean, you're on stage, you're presenting in front of people, and I don't think that comes naturally for everybody. So being able to communicate with different stakeholders, I always joke, and I think this is what I said that might have gotten me my first kind of sales job, is like the hardest job in sales is not selling tech to whatever organization. You try convincing the parent of an incoming 6th grade oboist that they should play oboe, because they are going to put up with more screeches and honks and everything else. And you're trying to convince both the parent and the kid that this is like a worthwhile investment of their time and their money in their future. That's sales right there. And I think that answer probably got me a little bit further ahead, because I mean, really, everyone's doing sales just in different capacities.
I love the way that you think about that too, because obviously there's a whole like sales hustle culture, especially here on LinkedIn. Yeah. But I don't necessarily hear many people talk about how like you can learn a little bit of sales even in being a teacher, a band teacher, convincing yeah.
And sales, I mean, this is probably I'll be too repetitive in the messaging on this side, but like sales is central to everything. Like within a company, if you have some new initiative you're working on, if you can't sell it internally, it's going to be dead in the water, right? So I think everything really does come back to sales, at least from this like creative, forge your own path kind of mindset.
Yeah. So you talked about entrepreneurship, more specifically entrepreneurship, like always wanting to kind of play more inside the context and the confines of an existing business.
Yeah.
But when it comes to like entrepreneurship, which is what you're now in, was there something or like a pivot point in your career that kind of told you, okay, now is the right time for me to launch and to do this thing on my own?
I don't think there was probably like a specific time. I think there was always a mindset. Like I told you, even when I was a band teacher, I wanted to do something creative music wise and start a business there. So there was always the idea in the back of my head that I wanted to do something. I think the mistake that I made for me personally, I'm not saying for everybody, but earlier in my career was thinking I have to have the dream idea that's going to revolutionize XYZ. Like I have to latch onto that idea to come up with something innovative. And now, as I get a little bit older, I think more the opposite way. I'm like, how do I latch onto an existing model and just optimize it and do it better? And once I figured out how to do that, that was like, oh, yeah, I can be really successful, as opposed to like, let's invest all this time and money into something with a chance of it taking off. And that's actually one of the things, kind of if you compare to like VC culture, I'm the opposite side of that spectrum. Like I want to be profitable and own the business and not take on lots of outside funding. And I think so many people are just like, how do I make a bet on something blowing up? But on the other hand, like most likely will not be successful. I'd rather say, I know I'm going to be successful. It's just a matter of time and pulling the right levers.
Yeah, I mean that's so good, and even with what you're saying about comparing it against like kind of the way that we approach things from a tech perspective with VC culture, it's like, yeah, this is it's a nuanced way of approaching entrepreneurship that I think really in the long run is going to be more sustainable and more viable. Not to discount or the need for kind of like industry revolutionizing entrepreneurs, because we obviously need that type of innovation. But yeah, I think as you were saying those things, something that was coming to my mind was how maybe tech entrepreneurship when it first started was a lot more of that cutting edge innovation. We're revolutionizing everything, because there really wasn't a lot of work that had been done in that space. But it seems like where we are today, tech as a whole, as an industry, even though it's continuing to grow and expand, there is still some degree of room to just optimize what is already existing, what is already there.
Yeah, and I think you'll see that every kind of business, from like more service-based blue collar type work, like, hey, great, buy a laundromat and optimize. Like you don't have to build we're going to revolutionize how laundromats work. How can you take an existing structure that works and be able to add onto that, I think is powerful. So that's what I've been really tapping into, I think, for the past couple of years here anyways, because it wasn't like a dedicated, I'm going to be an entrepreneur now. It was more just, hey, how do I take something that I've seen elsewhere and optimize it based on my own strengths?
That's great. That is super awesome. Well, hopefully, as a quick aside, hopefully you can't hear this in the recording, but for some reason, the sirens are going off. There's no bad weather or anything like that. It's supposed to be
Wednesday, first Wednesday at 1:00.
Well, exactly. It's normally supposed to be that, but that was like 48 minutes ago, and they're still going on and off. Anyway,
I did not hear anything, so I think
perfect.
You're good on my end.
We're good. That's why I keep on unmuting and unmuting myself. Anyways, we can always cut that part out. Anyway, so I'm back. I'm here. I'm with us. So speaking more specifically about automation helpers, right? Because we're talking about entrepreneurship. That the misconception that you had coming into entrepreneurship is that it had to be something totally revolutionary. It had to like completely change the world.
Mm-hmm.
And what you started to see now more practically is, no, I can take something that's already perfectly fine and optimize it. Would you say that that was kind of the impetus, or that was kind of like the catalyst for starting automation helpers, or like what got you into automation helpers?
Yeah, so the real honest answer is, I was in my job at Zoom and like well compensated tech professional, had a good career ahead of me, started to feel those winds of change coming of like, companies are doing layoffs and what's this look like? And probably the role I was in, I wasn't perfectly mapped to where my skill sets were at. And I thought, oh boy, if I get laid off now with, thousands of other people getting laid off, I was like, what do I want to do? And then can I even find the right job in this economic climate that would work? So I thought, hey, I'm just going to start doing that whole personal branding thing, which I had neglected to do for too many years of my life. And I thought, I'll start creating some YouTube content. Long time ago, I had made some Python content, so it was more on the development side. And I thought, maybe I want to try something different because, again, I always had that intersection of tech and sales. And so I felt like when I was making the Python content that was very just technical, it had nothing to do with like business process or the other skills that I brought to the table. So I thought, okay, how can I show off like how I understand how businesses operate and bring the technology piece? And I was like, oh, okay, that might be a good fit for no code. So I was like, let me start creating some Airtable content because I'd been using Airtable for my own projects and things like that. And I was like, I'll just see where it lands. If nothing else, use it as some example demos that if I need to get my next pre-sales job or something, that I've got kind of a reel that can highlight that. But that's when everything just started to take off like gangbusters and really launch into this whole thing, which wasn't really my initial plan. It was more just like a branding exercise that ended up launching something kind of cool.
That is so cool. And I guess I didn't put two and two together, but that was kind of the reason for starting the YouTube channel, right? Is to kind of get some of those feelers and those reels out initially, right?
Yeah. It was just how do I have a voice and not just be a name and profile on LinkedIn? And I knew that because I had been doing all the demos and pre-sales type content, that naturally I gravitate towards presentation and sharing. So video made sense as a medium as opposed to me writing content on LinkedIn, which is super successful for other people. But I was like, video seems to be exploding. Here's content that can showcase like multiple skill sets that I have. And so that's kind of where it took off.
That's so great. Yeah. And after our first, no, I think just before our first call, I was checking out your stuff on YouTube and I'm like, it's brilliant. And I think the thing that's so great, if anybody has a chance, I would highly recommend go and check Dan out on YouTube. It's just Dan Leeman, right? That's your channel, Dan Leeman. Yeah. Go check him out. And I think the thing that I appreciate about your approach to video is it's like so packed with value and so little fluff, right? It's not like all of these, pop-ups and, trying to capture your attention using all the music. It's just like, nope, I'm just going to like help you with the practical questions. So instead of you reading a blog post, you're going to actually like see this visually. I think you do such an excellent job with that. So
thanks. It's always been like an interesting balance where sometimes I feel like the direction of where stuff is going with YouTube Shorts and TikTok, that like this consultative, slightly longer, not flashy editing, that sometimes that is to my disadvantage. But at the end of the day, I just want to help people. And eventually, like I view it as a pyramid, right? Like there's all these people down here that just need help with Airtable and building, and I'll never have a conversation with them. And yet they'll have watched 30 videos that I created. And then we've got people like further up on the stack that are like, I need help with this one thing. Like, how do I integrate to QuickBooks for my invoicing? And so we might work with them on that. Then we have some people who are long-term partners where we're building complex systems for them. And it's just this hierarchy, right? And so we can help people at all levels of that pyramid. And it doesn't need to be the salesy, flashy type of content because that's not who we are. And I think if I went more that direction, we wouldn't find the kinds of clients that we want to work with. Instead, these are people who are like, oh, you've already helped me. I trust you. Let's form a deeper partnership or relationship.
And that's great. And it's evident in the fact that, and we're going to get into this in this next question, but it's evident that when you come to the table with true, pure intention and really delivering true value, results are going to come as a result of that. So, one thing that we talked about initially is, it's not even been a year that you guys started full time with Automation Helpers.
Yeah.
And you already have a team of what, 10? Is that right?
Yeah, we're definitely not all full time. It's kind of a spectrum from
Okay.
like 20 hours to 40 hours. But yeah, we've got 10 people working on the team. And there's no signs of slowing down. It's
Right.
like we just keep forming new partnerships and
Oh, man.
relationships, and it's
Yeah.
pretty fun.
I mean, and that's incredible. So again, to recap, like you guys aren't even a year in. You've got between, full and part-time, probably call it maybe 6 or 7 full-time
Yeah,
equivalent heads,
sure.
which is incredible. What would you attribute, if you could attribute to one thing, what would you attribute in your marketing mix that has garnered such a deal flow and a momentum as you guys have right now?
So I think it's kind of back to that whole idea that like everything is about sales. And I don't mean it from like a used car salesman and like, hey, check out this cool thing. Um, but I spend my full time in a marketing and sales capacity and partnerships with software vendors and talking to people about their problems. And I think, at least in the no code space, there's a ton of people who get stuck in that feast or famine mode of like, I'm a freelancer, like I'm going to approach this by myself and I'm going to, create some content or do something. And then boom, I land a client. And now I'm working 30, 40 hours a week on that client. And then I've got some admin stuff on top of that. And now I have no time to do sales or marketing. So I work with this client and then I'm done with that project. And now, oh yeah, that audience that I forgot to curate and keep feeding them content. Well, now I got to kind of build that up again. And so, this is something that every service-based business talks about, is that feast or famine cycle.
Hmm.
And I said, I would rather forego, like, yes, all the income comes to me from working on client stuff. I'd rather forego some of that to grow larger so that we can really develop kind of a content marketing arm of this, so we can constantly be solving problems and be available for people and be building those relationships. So then it's just grow, 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 as opposed to like grow, pick stuff up, be billing that client and kind of back and forth. So I think making an intentional move of saying that this is worth it so much that my full-time capacity should be focused on it, even though I could be billing, which would be money in my pocket, I think was a good intentional move that's kind of set the groundwork for that future growth.
And it's a wise investment. It's a good choice. It's something I talk with my clients and my prospects about all the time. Is I say, you need to be, at least one of the founders needs to be wholly devoted to sales and marketing on the growth side. And it's not something that you can just easily outsource, because I'd imagine as you're going through and you're creating all this content, you're having conversations with these folks who have challenges or have problems.
Yeah.
You are constantly evolving and dialing into the right offer, right? Like you're probably always making it a little bit better every time you pitch, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think having like, you don't want to go too far on one side of the spectrum. Like if I was just a sales guy and I had never built, or I had never worked with clients, like that works in enterprise sales organizations. It doesn't work, I'd say most of our clients are kind of small, mid-market at this point. And so when I come in, I know exactly what they need. And again, the pre-sale side, I sold to tons of different industries, right? It's not like just this specific, it's not just, I'm not selling into tech or something like that. So to be able to come and to understand what they need within minutes. I think it was actually just yesterday I had a sales call, and it was the shortest one I've ever had. It was 8 minutes. We got agreements sent out and signed by this morning, and we're kicking off a project because we knew exactly what they needed. Not a huge project, right?
Yeah.
But it's that process of building trust through the content where people understand, like, it's so weird, because I'm not an internet celebrity or anything like that. But to have people who are like, oh, Dan, I watched 25 of your videos, and they feel like they know you, even though you don't know them. So they already have some trust there. And, you keep building on that trust. You say, not only can you trust me from that standpoint, but let me just interject and see, do I have this right? Because here's, I think, the problem that you're facing and how we can solve for it. That is just building an engine of like, we're solving problems faster and faster and faster. Like, how many times do you have to build integrations to document management systems and QuickBooks and everything else that's like needed in business processes until you're like, yeah, we know what you need before you can even articulate what you need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a good space. The more experience you have, the more you can speak to that, and you can show how much more value you bring, because it's not like you're discovering it for the first time.
Right.
The thing that I'm curious about is, I mean, obviously we've talked quite a bit about video and video content marketing.
Yeah.
Has there been any other aspect of your marketing mix that you would attribute to this, substantial raise in revenue and yeah, garnering new clients?
I'm going to expose myself a little bit, but we have not had time for anything else. So like I basically cross post the content that I create to LinkedIn if it seems like there's a general enough audience for it. And I have like a decent size network, so that might play a little bit to it, but it all comes back to the video content. Like I was just talking to my partners and we're like, we really should come up with a sales funnel and have some content and build an email list and do every other and do some retargeting. We haven't done any of the what we should do. And instead it's been so successful, but then we're so busy that now we're like, okay, we need to bring on someone to help with some marketing and stuff like that. But I guess we've really been playing to our strengths. Of course, we need to build up some of the other pieces that I think would make us even more successful if we can use it as kind of a blended palette there.
Oh, but that's helpful. And these are the things I think people need to hear is like practically, where are you guys at? And it sounds like right now, video marketing, video content marketing, specifically on YouTube, has been a very helpful part of your marketing strategy. Just in large part, it sounds like just because there's a natural, I guess, inclination towards it. You've had a lot of experience in that type of interaction.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, obviously everybody's strengths are going to be different. Somebody might be an excellent copywriter, but might be terrible on camera. So it might not be a 1-for-1 translation.
Right.
But obviously this has been a helpful strategy for you guys. So, one of my listeners loves to kind of get behind the scenes and like understand some of the numbers, especially earlier on. It can be helpful. Yeah. So if you don't mind sharing some stats, I mean, some of the statistics that I'm really curious about is like, what % of your revenues would you say you guys are reinvesting into sales and marketing? Like even when you consider your time and any other like tools, subscriptions, services, anything else like that, what's the percentage you guys are spending right now?
Yeah. So to be honest, it's pretty sweat equity oriented. So I don't know if you guys have ever talked about a model called slicing the pie. For anyone who's getting into starting a business with co-founders, I recommend taking a look at this because the premise is that whenever you get into business with co-founders, like someone's going to feel screwed kind of, like in forming that relationship because you're like, oh, well, I'm the CEO and I get whatever % and you get this. And then someone's not doing the work. They're not putting in the time. And so that changes that relationship. So slicing the pie, I think we just bought the book on Amazon or something, but it really essentially focuses on like the inputs that go into the business, like who's spending money on what, who's spending time on what's your fair market rate of what's that worth. And then that's how we determine the equity structure. The reason I mention this is I've got 2 other co-founders. There's 3 of us. There's one who's acting more the CTO role, who's working on a product that we're building. We have one guy who's running the services side. So all the services with the consultants roll up to him. And I'm focused on sales and marketing. So I probably can't say an exact number. We don't spend a whole lot on software. We've got, a couple subscriptions to Script and some services like that, but it's pretty low on the actual monetary investment, but it's high on the equity side. So if you can imagine that out of 3 full-time roles, one person is fully invested in sales and marketing. That's kind of how I think about that. Reinvestment is the reinvestment of time more than anything else.
I'd imagine if we were to put dollars to it, I'd imagine we're looking at definitely well above 5%. Like because your time itself is worth more than that in the business, especially if you're just doing that. And the reason I say 5% is typically, as I've had conversations, usually 5% is what I'm seeing a lot of early stage software dev agencies spend in sales and marketing. So I think this is another example where it's like, you spend a little bit more, i.e. through your own time, you're going to have the types of results that you guys are having. Do you work with any outsourced services for video editing or script writing or anything else like that?
Nope, not
Okay.
yet. So
Not yet.
again, we're trying to bring on someone so I think I don't become the bottleneck in the
Mm,
organization since I'm doing marketing and sales. Before I was like, oh yeah, marketing and sales, those two go together. But as I'm realizing, I'm like, it's so hard for me to switch out of like, go record a video and do, content marketing for this other software company, do that kind of stuff, and then flip into a sales call, handle contracts at night, and then go do video editing. Like it's a really weird balance. So we'll
mm,
definitely be investing further into that area to get some support. But honestly, there's something so powerful about founder led marketing, like just having straight conversations. And again, like I think of it as a threshold of like the editing isn't amazing. I can point to like
mm,
5 other people who do the editing way better, but I can't point to anybody who talks about the real problems and consults in the same way. So I'm just so focused on like the business problem that I'm like, maybe we'll have tons of money flowing in for content production stuff later on, but it's no one's had a problem if it's not the perfect transition between what we're doing on the video side.
mhm. I love that you said that. I love that you're talking about this specifically in the video side of things, but I'm curious if there's other instances that you can think of where having founder-led growth, founder-led sales and marketing looks and feels different than having, a dedicated like just marketing either employee or agency or something like that do the marketing. Like what other differences could you see or have you experienced yourself?
Yeah. So, I mean, having worked for a number of other companies, be it one that's a partner and one that was a startup, and then for very big companies, I mean, having it founder led, you are so invested. Like you hear the problems that your clients are facing, and immediately I turn around and create content on that because I'm like, well, if they're facing that problem, probably someone else is. So I think that kind of very, very fast feedback loop of like, hear about something and create content. I haven't seen that anywhere else. So many other companies, it's. I mean, we're also focused on like the demand gen side as opposed to lead gen. Like so many
Mm,
companies are like, let's stage get, let's lock a white paper that we've created about how we've done whatever in whatever industry, and like sometimes it works, but that's so old school for me
mhm.
personally. And I'd much rather just have a real conversation about the problems that people are facing. And I mean, watch me eat my words. Like 2 years from now, we'll be back together and I'll be like, oh, yeah, we got this marketing team and here's everything that we're doing. But at least for that early growth,
Mm,
I just find that being as genuine as possible about the issues and being able to create content immediately and not worry about let's check off 15 boxes in this content approval process and blah, blah, blah. Like it's not about the management of content. It's about how
mhm,
quickly can we get real meaningful content out there.
mhm.
It's a velocity game.
And it's so much more organic. It's like it's alive, right? It's like it's a living kind of marketing versus kind of more of a
Yeah.
static or like replicated marketing. The other thing that I guess I've seen, and I'm curious if you experience this too, but I find that being in the driver's seat of my own marketing also helps me to refine my offer and my positioning.
Hmm.
Because like especially when you're early on, and again, I'd love for you to speak to this, but like
Yeah.
when you're early on, like there is so much that you're still just trying to figure out in terms of like product market fit or like service market fit. And you're never going to get that if you close off the feedback loop that comes with, well, how are people receiving the content marketing that I'm putting out? Right.
Oh, absolutely. And I think about everything from like if you typically have marketing and sales separate, and you always have sales complaining about lack of leads from marketing, and then you have marketing who then let's juice the numbers and turn up leads, but then it's not very qualified leads. When you're seeing it end to end, and then also coming through and like I'm scoping or architecting stuff, and at the beginning I was doing service delivery. It's like if you own that whole process, you can see all of the issues at play. So if I wanted to go pure velocity and try to get as many subscribers on YouTube as I could, I think I'd take a different approach. Just if that was like, I want to be a productivity, there's lots of YouTube productivity stuff out there. There could be content that I'm creating that would make it more popular. But those aren't good kinds of clients that come through
Mm,
because zero budget for anything, just help me with whatever problem is on my mind, haven't kind of worked with a consultant in the past before. And so being able to see that and craft the offers behind it. Like we talk to so many business owners, I can, just see in their facial expression, like how are they perceiving this? One of the things when we got started is I said, I want to be the easiest to do business with agency that's around. Well, that led us to doing more hourly work than a lot of other competitors. We have some competitors that go very fixed sprint. Here's exactly what's in the sprint. And if you read any consulting 101 kind of stuff, it steers you in that direction because it's easier to forecast. It's, more repeating revenue, that kind of stuff. And what we found is that there's a gap of people that doesn't serve because in the no-code world, you can iterate so quickly. So if you say, I box off this scope and it's exactly this, well, you could uncover some feature and like build out something else in an hour and a half. And to say, no, it has to fit exactly within the scope, that was a gap. And so, we do some projects where we have fixed scope and that kind of stuff. But we heard this message of like, that doesn't resonate enough. Like we want to have a long-term partnership, but we want to be able to have trust. And that sometimes means more work here and less work here and picking up pieces as they go. But I don't think I would have uncovered that had I not been directly in the end-to-end process. I would have just said, yep, let's, copy what other models are out there. And so we really gear at the flexibility side. And another thing with that is by going hourly, we invoice after the fact. Everybody else prepays. They're like, well, we got to build trust between both parties. We have, again, watch me shoot myself in the foot. We've never been screwed over on this because if we do shorter invoice cycles and we're going hourly and we're focused on a long-term relationship, what's the most revenue that we would work that we would lose if they didn't pay that first invoice? So we're picking up all on these pain points from working with other consultants. And we're saying, what if we can just be really easy to work with and people love working with us? And I don't think that would have come up had we not kind of been seeing the full end-to-end cycle.
Mm-hmm. And being part of just continuing to retailer what that offer is that you guys have. I'm really glad that you brought up hourly pricing and pricing in general. I don't think I included this in my questions, but it's something that I love to talk about on the show is pricing strategy. And it sounds like where you guys landed was through your own experience. Hourly tended to lend itself well to a better experience for your end client. And I guess the question that I have for that is when you're talking to clients, and maybe it's just different because it's in the no-code space, it's a slightly different kind of service or like a solution you're trying to solve for. Maybe because a lot of times the solutions are a little bit more compact and they're a little bit more acute. Like you're able to address specific parts of the business process. But do you ever have issues where, the companies that you're working for have maybe like a fixed budget or they have a fixed timeline, and so because of that, they have issues or they take problem with an hourly approach? Or what's been your experience?
Well, so one thing is we do fixed projects as well. It's just not as common. But the thing that I would say is it's not hourly with a like, hey, you just tell us some stuff and we'll get back to you. And suddenly you've got a bill for, 100 hours or something on there. What it ends up being is it forces that communication process early. So we say, as we bite off a feature or, some aspect of this, we're going to give you an estimate on this to give you an idea. Also, what we do up front is we have many clients who elect for the hourly model, but we'll say, hey, let me give you an idea because we've seen projects like yours in the past. So if we break off this piece of it, that's probably a 25-hour piece, and this is a 15-hour piece and whatever, so that from a budgetary standpoint, you have an idea. But the thing is that it helps defray the risk because I think of a fixed project being essentially just a locking in a risk model. So what happens? I mean, think through it logically. If you are the client and you ask someone to give you a fixed bid, they will naturally bake in wiggle room, and that will create a higher bid than if you go hourly because they're saying, I don't want the risk if XYZ could happen. Now, sometimes there's pressure on them to lower that because they're being competitive against another agency if you're getting multiple quotes and that kind of thing. But ultimately, if they lower their rates too much and they're taking a hit on it, they don't want a long-term partnership with you, the client. So however you look at it, a fixed bid is just saying someone is carrying more risk in this and we're locking in the risk. And we look at hourly as being able to say, we form that relationship so you trust us and we keep giving you the estimates so that you have what you need from a budgetary standpoint. But it's not locking in the risk. If you say, here's some high level feature, we don't sit and say, okay, well, let's do a paid deep dive discovery session. Let's take the first 20 hours of the project and do discovery. There's no need for it because we can say, here's roughly what this will look like. We've done these pieces different times. We can talk about examples of that. You trust us, let's execute. And so I think that really increases that time to value too, where other projects don't. Because if you do a big fixed project, sure, we can get you an estimate, but boy, we are, dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's because there's inherent risk of doing that.
Yeah, and all the things that you're saying, they're in a lot of ways an echo of a previous guest of mine, Phil Ledgerwood. And he's very, very much, him and I actually were the first to have a nice little conversation about hourly versus value pricing. And he opened my eyes actually quite a bit to hourly pricing. And their approach very much is they're an agile shop first and foremost. And so agile by its nature kind of lends itself to an hourly pricing strategy. And to the point that you just made, taking the hourly approach can give you a more flexible scope of work. So you're not set on these have to be the features, even if 2-3 weeks down the road you find out actually that's not a feature we really care about anymore because it's actually something else that we need. So you can pivot a little bit better on hourly.
Yeah. And then, I think value-based has a huge role to play, but it's in different areas. So for us, it's like when we build the same kind of integration X amount of times, then we want to be able to do that as here's value-based pricing. We're looking at doing many more. So you've heard of like iPaaS or an integration platform as a service. We want to do integrations as a service because invariably what happens is you create an integration, but there are costs associated with maintaining it and APIs change and things break over time. So what if you just said, hey, pay this monthly amount. It's not custom development, but you get access to this integration. It's supported for you. And so we really do incorporate value-based pricing, but it's on things that we know provide this concrete amount of value to you as an organization. And that if you're trying to build everything from scratch, that's custom. And so there's that risk component.
100%. Yes. Value pricing. It's exactly what you said, like going a fixed pricing approach. Essentially all it does is it's just shifting who's taking the risk on. When you're doing a fixed based price, you're taking a lot of the risk on, which to your point, if you've done it a million times before, the risk is super low because you've been there, you've done that. And so even though it's still taking the risk off of the client, right? So there's still value for them because they don't have that risk that would have been there otherwise.
Right.
There's also less risk for you. That really is the perfect win-win because it's a well-worn path. You've been there, done that. I'm glad that you said that. This is a great example.
Yeah.
So I have another question, and this goes back to our conversation about YouTube.
Sure.
And I'm going back into a previous episode, actually our second episode, with a gentleman by the name of George. He also has a great YouTube presence with their dev agency. And something that he told me about on that interview is he said that the YouTube content is a really great tool for qualifying leads, but it's hard for them to really attribute who's actually coming to them directly because of their channel. Mm-hmm. So you, on the other hand, when you and I were talking, one of the things you had said to me is you said, I've noted significant direct leads from YouTube or people citing YouTube when they've come, into the pipeline. Yeah. So do you have any insights? Like, why do you think that might be the case for you guys in particular? Do you think it's something to do with the type of content you're creating that's driving these types of leads? Or is it a part of the market that you're serving that's a little bit different? Or what might you point to as to why that might be different?
Yeah. So, one thing I would say is in their organization, they already had like multiple channels. And so attribution becomes tricky. For us, like we talked about earlier, YouTube really is the only channel. So we can attribute most of everything to that. We get some from partners or some from LinkedIn or things like that. But we do a lot of like self-based reporting, I'll just say like, hey, how'd you hear about us? And they'll say, oh yeah, I was watching, and they'll name like a specific video that we did 6 months ago or something. And I knew I needed project management help and blah, 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 and kind of cite that. So we don't have like crystal clear attribution reporting, but it's also not an issue yet because we've been focused primarily on one channel. But I think for us, and I think it's a topic I maybe spoke to a little bit earlier, is the idea that we're creating the kinds of content that resonate with the kinds of clients or people that we want to have a working relationship with. So it's not just like, like we go in depth, like most videos are like in that 10 to 15 minute range of how to solve a problem. And here's a business use case. Here's the problem. Here's how we solve that problem using the tool that we're doing. So for the people who see that and then say, oh, I see that, like, Dan, I need some help tweaking that. I need some help building upon that. They're already gravitating towards that kind of content resonated with me. There's all of these other SaaS YouTube channels where, again, it's very like feature based. And I don't want to be how to help you implement one little feature. I can help kind of craft this strategy around what you're doing. And so naturally, I think you see that content and you're like, that makes sense. And therefore it is kind of pre-qualifying leads because they know what they're getting. It's not two separate sets of things. So if we suddenly made content that's a very different style, and then tried to use that to package up leads, then I think it would be kind of sending a different impression or signal. And that's nothing to say, I don't know about anybody else's business or how they manage it, but for us, that was kind of that deliberate decision of like the longer form consultative stuff isn't the fit for everybody. But then they don't bother to watch the content. They're not going to come to us, and we don't have to worry that we're not the right fit. And the people who do watch that content, they already know it's a good fit. And so our close rates for once someone gets to a consultation with me are, well over 50%. And it's almost always like within the first call for a lot of clients too.
Amazing. That's really good. And yeah, it shortens that sales cycle because there is so much trust built up, and you've done a lot of the qualifying ahead of time because of the way that you've created the content. And I liked how you said that too. It's like, I'd never thought about it that way, but seeing YouTube in and of itself as being like the type of content you create as being a way to qualify your leads, because there's going to be a certain type of person who's not going to work well with you, who's going to get bored of your content. It's like, well, great. See ya,
Oh, let me give you a good example. There's a platform called Go High Level, and everything they do on their website is like the long sales page, flashy, like, here's how you can generate 10 million leads and you should become an agency and do our affiliate model. And it's all this kind of stuff. It's very overwhelming. And it's so interesting. The tech underneath it is really good tech. Like it handles a lot of campaigns plus the CRM side. Like it's good stuff. But oftentimes because they sell with that model, like there are certain clients who use Go High Level who are a good fit, but because they've seen some of the other content we've created. But we've been intentional about not just like, go high level, do, because then we know that's not like, I don't sell because like, it's this flashy, whatever. It's like, is this technology going to be a good fit for your organization? Does it help you with your business process? And if you don't hear that message, and if you're just about the flash, then like, you're not going to like working with us. So I think it's just part of the messaging. And does that go kind of end to end? Does the content of the YouTube lend itself to the sales process, lend itself to the actual work that we do in the service delivery side?
Man. Well, if anybody wants a masterclass, in my opinion, of how to create good content that converts the right type of leads into qualified leads, go check out Dan's YouTube channel. You guys are doing a great job. I'm loving seeing this stuff. And I just even watched your most recent video that you put up as I'm trying to get ideas for how to create my YouTube channel. So,
well, feeling is mutual. I've appreciated seeing your stuff too.
Oh, I appreciate that, Dan. Well, I've got a question about the future, and then we're going to turn it over to some words of wisdom. So the really quick question just about the future is, what is the big vision for Automation Helpers? I mean, you guys have made such great progress in under a year. Where do you guys want to take this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's so funny how when you start something, all these other revenue streams just open up. Like we have
Mm.
SaaS companies that come to us and say, "Can you do content marketing for us?" That's one I never even thought about as we were doing this. The biggest thing that we've seen, and I alluded to it a little bit, is when we create integrations over and over again, that lends itself to being productized because, why redo that time and time again? But the thing that we see is like some integrations work like this and there's a couple config settings and it's good to go. And others are like, well, the way we do invoicing is slightly different. So we're planning on both on doing like integrations as a service. So you can package up and say, yeah, I want all of my contracts process and I want all of my invoicing, and I use, Xero or QuickBooks, or I use PandaDocs or DocuSign. And then we've got like, yep, and you do it this way or that way. And like we've got some config settings, but we can also tweak it if you do things differently, which I think is unique. If you search for a lot of those integrations today, it's all Make and Zapier and different platforms that are all like, build it yourself. But guess what? The average business owner doesn't want to take like 50 hours to learn a platform, to hack together an integration that takes another whatever hours on top of that. So that's like a huge area that we see. And then more specifically, we're building an email syncing tool. And specifically, we're like getting into how do we kind of have like the sales process as part of that. So companies like Salesforce and HubSpot have like an add-on for your email, and you can see all the information about the people you're working with. And there really isn't that for the no-code space. And so we're developing a product because we were tracking in the month of July, I think like 70% of the people who came to us as leads for services mentioned something about their email process, and there wasn't like a great solution. So we're building that as a product side. And the overall takeaway from this is that by being a services-based company, you hear problems over and over and over again. If you put all your eggs in the basket of building this product, then you got to add on a million features to this. And how do we fit that in for our ICP and that kind of stuff? And we're taking the other approach, which is what are the biggest pain points? Because we've heard this time and time again. And then it's just a natural like, hey, you can use this product while you're doing services stuff. And it's more a synergy play for us as we're going about them.
And I am a huge fan of that. This is the thing that I tell people all the time about when we're talking about why I think a good, healthy bootstrap approach involves start with the service and develop the product to either go alongside it or in tandem off to the side. That is so great. I'm glad to hear that this is actually taking root for you guys as a bootstrapped software company.
Yeah.
This is really great. Well, I know we have to wrap up here pretty soon because you're going to have to run, but I'd love it if you could give our audience some words of wisdom and specifically think about that one person who is just starting off in this space. Maybe it's a software engineer who's currently in corporate America, who's longing to break free of the chains of corporate America and go start their own thing. Or maybe it's even somebody who just recently started. Like, what would be the words of wisdom that you would imbue to them?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that frustrated me when I was trying to figure out how I could find my space is that there's so many people who are like, oh yeah, take what you're doing in your day job and go freelance for this. Well, at the time when I was like in the Microsoft space, there was a very easy path. I could be a Microsoft consultant and recruiters would find me jobs and I could do that. But that wasn't where I wanted to go. And here I was in this pre-sales role, and there's not really freelance pre-sales capacities. There's coaches and things like that. And so I always felt frustrated because I'm like, I have all these skill sets, but I don't know how to like put them together in the right combination that like is a service that people would want to buy. And so I would say if you can find your strengths and your skill sets, but then look for those like adjacent areas. So for me, it wasn't like I was a no code operator. Like my job wasn't like managing lead flow for Zoom or anything like that. But I happened to use some no code tools, just capacity management and stuff for my services team and things like that. And so it was finally that realization of like, oh, let me take tools that I'm familiar with, but I have all of these skills around business process, selling and marketing, and then being able to package that together, where it took me a little while to kind of make that roundabout move. And I think there's probably a lot of people in the same boat. Again, if you're a developer and you're on a popular tech stack already, like you'll have unlimited work. You don't even have to really be entrepreneurial. You'll just be able to find freelance work. But I think, finding a space that's out there, if you're a developer or on the no-code side, or you're in sales or marketing or wherever you are, but you see a space, like there's a lot happening in e-commerce. Well, could you position yourself as taking your past experience and pairing it with that to be able to create some kind of offering? I think that was the aha moment for me, because there's plenty of people who are like, start sooner, like your company doesn't value enough, you should be doing this freelance, whatever. But had I started earlier in my career, I personally wouldn't have had the same value to deliver clients that I do today. Like, it's because of working with all these industries that I can just package it up and be super valuable. So I'm not on the end of the spectrum that's like, everybody should quit their corporate job and go start your own business. But if you're entrepreneurial minded, like, how can you make that pivot in a way that is going to get you leads and clients that you want to work with?
Yeah. Find that adjacent value add that you could even be running concurrently right now, before fully kind of leaving it all and burning all the bridges and going full steam ahead. I love that. Those are good words of wisdom. Well, if people, as they've listened to the episode today, are thinking to themselves, man, I'd love to reach out to Dan, or I'd love to just follow his story, where would be the best places that they could go to follow or reach out to you for automation helpers, or you just like personally, where would be the best place?
Yeah, for sure. So of course there's the YouTube channel for the actual content that we're producing. I don't have too much stuff about the journey that I've been on there, but if you want to see that, again, you can just search for Dan Leeman on YouTube and that'll take you to that channel. And then I'm pretty active on LinkedIn as well. So feel free to find me. Obviously, Tony and I are connected, so you can find us through mutual connections there. But there I've shared a little bit of some of the things we're working on. And, my first month, I was surprised that we got all of these leads that were coming through the woodwork. So it's really interesting, I think, to kind of see that evolution of where we go, because we always see the success stories after the fact. We'll come back in a couple of years and we'll be talking about the multi-million-dollar business that we are at that point in time. But I think being able to start off small and incremental and chart that growth is pretty fun.
Well, I'm excited that we got to interview you before you guys made it really, really big, because then I can just be like, hey, we got here before you guys were like super cool.
Same thing with the podcast. I got to be guest number 8, right? Yeah. You'll be 50 deep at that point. So.
I mean, hopefully that or more. You never know.
Exactly.
Know. Well, Dan, I really appreciate you taking some time today. Having you on the show has been great, because I've learned a lot, and I hope our audience has learned a lot. And I think what you've really inspired me to do is really be a better value provider in the content I create in my marketing, whether that be on YouTube or LinkedIn or wherever else. That was one of my biggest takeaways, I think, from our conversation. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Tony. Really appreciate being on the DevLaunch podcast. And this is great.
And thank you to our listeners. If you found value out of our podcast today, please share it with your friends and subscribe for future episodes. Also, don't forget to leave us a review, because it helps other people find us and hear inspiring stories like the one we heard today. If you are the founder of a software development agency, or you know somebody who is, and you'd like to share something exciting that you're up to with our audience, drop me a line at tony@equip.com. That's ACCQUIP.com.